Hey, it's your guy Tyrrell back with the interviews. In today's video, we're going to briefly break down how PSG comfortably defeated RB Leipzig to advance to the Champions League final. When we break down the game, when we do look at the board, we have RB Leipzig in more of a 4-1-4-1, and we ended up seeing PSG in their preferred 4-3-3. So first, we'll look to see how both sides to look to approach the game. And what we end up seeing from RB Leipzig is that they did drop off into that 4-1-4-1, and they didn't look to press PSG from the front. And there are two reasons why they possibly didn't do that. One, they were wary of the pace in behind of Neymar, Di Maria, and Mbappe. And two, when you look to PSG's initial quarterfinal match against Atalanta, they comfortably bypassed Atalanta's high press on a consistent basis and were able to create quality chances. So rather than risking being bypassed higher up the pitch and leaving space for PSG's front three to break into, they dropped off into more of a mid-block in that 4-1-4-1. And when you look across the pitch, what you end up seeing is you have Poulsen sitting on top of Marquinhos. Out in the wider areas, Nkunku and Neymar were tucking in a bit narrow. And then in the midfield zone, you had Campbell sitting ahead of the back four and Olmo and Sabitzer stepping out to those PSG shuttlers. What you end up seeing from PSG, though, is that they did look to shift that 4-3-3. You ended up having Neymar once again playing in that central role and looking to receive the ball in pockets of space to the right or left of Campbell. But what we ended up seeing was that the positioning of the PSG shuttlers were crucial, because rather than looking to receive the ball in those central zones, we ended up seeing Herrera and we saw Paredes dropping off into the half spaces to try and get possession. What that ended up doing was that it pulled out Olmo and Sabitzer, and more so down PSG's left-hand side. When you have Sabitzer stepping out into the path of Paredes, then that leaves a gap between Neymar and Campbell for Neymar to drop into. So while that's all going on, you have Bernat higher up the pitch looking to peg back Neymar, and then you have Mbappe in narrow positions in between Upamecano and Mukiele, and sometimes you even saw him in between the center backs. Over on the left-hand side, we saw rotation from Carrera, Herrera, and Di Maria, but Di Maria was often in more of a narrow position between Angelino and Klosterman, and we saw Herrera adopt more advanced positions between the lines, but he was often boxed in just ahead of Angelino and Klosterman, but behind Olmo and Nkunku, and he struggled to influence the game from that position. So through that movement, what you end up seeing is that Neymar obviously is looking to receive the ball between the lines to either side of Campbell, and then you have Di Maria and Mbappe in those narrow gaps looking to break in behind. What we often saw from PSG was that specifically when Paredes wasn't being pressed by Sabitzer, he had a lot of time on the ball in that left half space to try and clip balls over the top for Mbappe, darting between Mukiele and Upamecano. But those two Leipzig defenders did a very good job of clearing their lines. There was a time where we had Di Maria ahead of Angelino trying to clip the ball beyond Mukiele for Mbappe, but once again, Mukiele did a very good job of clearing the danger. We saw Marquinhos trying to clip a long ball over Mukiele for Mbappe, and there was one example in particular where Marquinhos split Sabitzer and Campbell for Neymar between the lines, but when he tried to clip the ball over Upamecano and Mukiele for Di Maria, it was slightly overhit. Nevertheless, PSG were still able to create chances from open play, and majority of those chances stemmed through the great work of Mbappe and Neymar. We have Kimpembe splitting Neymar and Sabitzer for Mbappe dropping narrow off of Mukiele. Mbappe is able to gain a yard on the Leipzig right back and split Upamecano and Mukiele for Neymar darting between the center backs, but Neymar's unable to put PSG up 1-0. And if we look to another great example from open play, it highlights why Leipzig didn't want to press higher up the pitch. It stems with Mbappe dropping off deeper to drag out Klosterman and drop a loose ball into the path of Herrera. Herrera is able to bypass Angelino and Klosterman to find Di Maria just ahead of Upamecano, and that creates a 2v2 with Di Maria and Neymar against Upamecano and Mukiele. What we see from Di Maria is that he's able to get across Upamecano and slide the ball beyond Angelino and Klosterman for Mbappe breaking down that right channel. Mbappe does well to hold off Klosterman and get himself into a 1v1 situation with Angelino, but when Klosterman recovers his positioning, Mbappe splits both Leipzig defenders to find Neymar cutting across Mukiele, but he fires his shot inches wide of the net. However, the key factor to this game was PSG's pressing. Unlike Atletico Madrid, who allowed Leipzig to build from the back and were able to create overloads due to the fact that Atletico Madrid dropped off a bit deeper, PSG looked to press from the front and ensure that Upamecano, Klosterman, and Mukiele couldn't get on the ball. So what you ended up seeing was that when Leipzig looked to push forward, they essentially were a back three because Angelino was pushing forward down that left channel, and then Mukiele was holding his positioning in a narrow right center back position. So as you could see, it was clear that PSG's pressing scheme was to ensure that Leipzig couldn't play balls through that midfield zone, and ultimately what led to their downfall was their persistence to do so. Still, PSG were warned in the opening stages when Upamecano was able to bypass Neymar and find Olmo between the lines to the left of Paredes. Olmo was able to run at that PSG back four and place Nkunku into a good goal scoring position, but he failed to test Sergio Rico. Nevertheless, as that game continued, PSG's pressing ensured that Leipzig couldn't build from the back, couldn't get any service into Poulsen, and frankly, they forced Leipzig into some mistakes. We look to one example where you end up seeing Upamecano once again bypassing Neymar to get the ball into Campbell, but then we saw Paredes step into his path and force Campbell to give away possession. Mbappe was able to get across Campbell and slide the ball out to Herrera, but when Mbappe slides that ball out to Herrera, he instantly runs off Campbell and Upamecano towards the box, and Herrera is able to play his pass beyond Klosterman to find Mbappe breaking free towards goal, but he fails to beat Gulacsi from point-blank range. We can look to the time where Upamecano tried to bypass Mbappe and Paredes stepping into the path of Sabitzer to find Olmo once again, but this time Paredes was able to slide across to win possession. Early on in the game, Leipzig got away with a mistake when we saw Di Maria forcing Klosterman to play the ball back to Gulacsi, and Neymar instantly swarmed the Leipzig goalkeeper, and he fired his clearance off Neymar into the path of Mbappe, who did put the ball into the net, but the referee penalized Neymar for a handball. But to no surprise, PSG were able to double their lead towards the end of that first half, and it stemmed through their pressing. This time it was Di Maria closing down Gulacsi, and he looked to try to play the ball in towards Campbell, but he misplaced his pass into the Leipzig midfielder, and Paredes was able to slide in to receive the ball, and he played it around Campbell for Neymar, who backheeled the ball into the path of Di Maria, and he was able to double PSG's lead. Frankly, the only real issue that PSG encountered in that opening half was down their left-hand side, because with Bernat pushing forward, that left Paredes covering that space, and often what ended up happening was that it was down to a defensive breakdown or an individual mistake. You had the time where Paredes was pushing forward and he slipped and dallied on the ball, and Sabitzer was able to push down that right channel. And there was one time where they were able to get onto a loose ball and was almost clipping the long ball over Paredes for Leimer breaking down that right channel, and he did a very good job of holding off Paredes as he broke into that right half space, and his pullback for Poulsen nearly saw Leipzig equalize. So as you can see, this was a comfortable win for PSG, and their attention to detail was crucial here. Their pressing ensured that Leipzig couldn't play from the back and play balls into that midfield zone, and ultimately that same pressing forced Leipzig into mistakes and ultimately a goal. When you look to Leipzig though, yes, you can give Nagelsmann some criticism for their approach, but it was logical. He didn't want to risk his back three being exposed by the PSG front three, and ultimately what let them down here was that they don't have much of an attacking threat going forward with Timo Werner going to Chelsea. So they were going to be looking to play through Angelino, but that press ensured that they couldn't get balls into him, and ultimately PSG's overall tactical approach allowed Neymar, Mbappe, and Di Maria to get into good positions, and they ultimately punished Leipzig as their worthy winners and deserved finalists for the Champions League. Hi everybody, thanks for watching, and subscribe here for your latest tactical analysis and daily commentary on the InnerViews show. And if that wasn't enough, don't forget you could find more organic, unfiltered soccer/football analysis on the InnerViews podcast, the best soccer/football podcast in the world, available on iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, and any Android apps on your Android devices.